Lawrence Frontura, also known as Punk Rock Skate Dad on Instagram. And today I'm going to go over the G.I. Joe Retro H.I.S.S vehicle, which is a Walmart exclusive. These have been fairly hard to come by, but in the past couple weeks, I found a bunch of them. So I think, just like the All-Striker, you're going to be able to find them really soon if you're not already finding them. But I want to discuss this, how it compares to the original H.I.S.S, and if it's even worth you going out and getting. I'm going to say right off the bat, if you watched the All-Striker one of mine, you're going to realize that it's worth it. It fits perfectly. If you're looking at the two, you can already look at, this is the retro and this is the original, and you can tell how closely they are to being the same. There are a couple differences that I'm going to go over. Nothing major and nothing that you're really going to notice. But a small detail to make the figure, which is a 4-inch figure, fit a little bit better, because as we discussed before, these figures are just a little bit smaller. So they fit better in the retro vehicles. And I'm actually going to show you with this other H.I.S.S, if you want to just make a quick little modification, what you can do. Anyway, so let's get into it. So first, let's start off with the box art. Once again, this gives you the feel of the original G.I. Joes from the 1980s, which is what we all fell in love with. From your Cobra the Enemy, to the way the G.I. Joe looks, to the picture looking almost exactly the same as before, with the exception of a Real American Hero is gone, and just like on the All-Striker, the H.I.S.S driver has been redrawn to look more like his actual figure. Now, he did not come with this weapon, which is the Baroness's gun, which somehow I ended up with so many Baroness's guns, most of them not being the original. But I just threw it on him. I thought it was a nice little touch. And then we have the back art, which, like the All-Striker, it looks very similar. The figure is placed how our 80s version was, with our file card on the back, and I had already discussed the file card and what my displeasure is with the file cards and them giving it in different languages. And to be honest, really not giving us too much like the old file cards. But once again, Hasbro, this is kind of cheap in my opinion. I don't need to read it in French or any other language, and just like anyone in France probably doesn't want to read in English. So, Hasbro, let's not be cheap. Let's give them, let's give us what we want. And we're paying a good amount of money, and the amount of money we spend on gas running around looking for these things because you decided not to produce enough right off the bat. So, let's get into it. Comparing the two figures, I think this is a really nice figure. It is a nice update. He doesn't have a gigantic head, which the original H.I.S.S driver does. As once again, they are 4 inches, not 3 3/4, which everyone wants, and obviously no O-rings. But it's a nice looking figure. When you look at him, you can tell it's definitely, looks like the original figure. Just like the crankcase and the All-Striker. So I'm pleasantly happy with how he looks. And to be honest, I think most other people will be also. Alright, now let's discuss the H.I.S.S. And as you can see right now, I have the retro and the original side by side. And if you look closely, and you probably don't need to look that closely, you can see which is the original and which is the retro. The original, the stickers are obviously a little worn. Once again, there's a little bit of a difference in the color. Not very much. You're not going to notice right off the bat. The cannons are a little different, as the original cannons are a little bit thicker. than the retro, but the retro looks sleeker. I like the retro a little bit more, to be honest. It just seems more like an actual cannon. And when you look at the front, you can see that the blasters are just a little bit thinner. You get to the canopy here, and obviously the original one here is a little dull. I've cleaned it up a little bit. The retro canopy has a little slit right in the top here, which you'll find in what seems to be the other H.I.S.S that I've recently gotten in the past few years. So everything's pretty much the same. The pegs are different, just the same as on the H.I.S.S, which I actually didn't speak about. So on the retro, you're going to have a smaller peg fit. So your original figures are not going to fit on it. One of the things that I did notice, and I noticed this on another set of H.I.S.S that I have, is that if we want to change this out and pop this out, what you do have is a three peg system here. And my guess is that is to keep people from swapping them out. So no one's selling to another seller. Here's our original H.I.S.S. And we pop it out and you can see there's two. Of course, what I did notice is, if I want to, I can drop the original in here. So that means since this has three, it won't drop in. But you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out, all you gotta do is get rid of one of the holes and it'll drop, or one of the pegs, and it'll drop in perfectly fine. So if you really like the way that looks, you can swap it out. But if you have some of the other H.I.S.S, like this Joe H.I.S., which I refuse to use as a Joe, as you can see, and you like the way this cannon looks, well, now we can swap it out and give this a more high-tech feel with, honestly, what do look like better cannons, to be honest. But I just have a nice feel for the originals, which most of us do, I do believe. So we're just gonna pop this one out and forget about him. Throw back on our original here. All right. Got Cobra Commander here. I've also fixed the cannons so they actually move up and down and they stay up with a paper clip. All right. So one big difference, and this is very smart of them to do, because once again, the figures are bigger. They changed the inside. So when you look at the retro H.I.S.S, you're going to see these little X's, which this didn't have. Everything else is the same. But what it actually is they actually cut out this piece here. This one no longer has it. So now, if you take your H.I.S.S figure, and if you try to put him in the original H.I.S.S, he's not going to fit. He's just too long. But if we want to drop him in the retro H.I.S.S, it closes perfectly fine without any issues, which in my opinion is exactly what we want. So I do like the fact that Hasbro and the designers looked at that and they changed it. I noticed that it was also on these ones too. So for the most part, this retro H.I.S.S has been around for a while. I wasn't collecting for quite some time, so I'm not sure how many of these retro H.I.S.S and the retro All-Strikers have already been around, and now they're just bringing them out with a nice little packaging. But that is a nice little design, a change that they made, so the 4-inch figures do fit nice and easily. All right, so let's finish this up. Okay, so the conclusion here. If you're wondering if you should pick one of these up, if you're a collector and you've been fiending for G.I. Joe stuff like so many of us, you're gonna do it. If you're not worried about the classified, you only want to go with the original lines, the 3/3/4, which is really the 4-inch now. This is a nice line to get. Again, from the box art to the way the H.I.S.S actually looks, and again, the updated sculpt of the figure, which I like this figure more than the original one. Unlike the crankcase, which I did say I tend to like the crankcase a little bit more, the original crankcase. But again, you'll be able to fit your original figures back here. You're not going to be able to fit them on the pegs, but you're going to get this wonderful box, and I do mean wonderful box, only missing the A Real American Hero. That, as I said before, I want to try and come up with some sort of display, like a Toys R Us aisle in my basement, in the G.I. Joe room. So as you walk down, there'll just be like a little section that kind of reminds you of that G.I. Joe section, because we've all seen the pictures of like, wow, this is what we miss. Not only just Toys R Us, but again, this is a wonderful, wonderful toy. If you never had a H.I.S.S, this is the perfect time to go out and get one. It seems almost impossible that someone that is a G.I. Joe collector didn't have a H.I.S.S, but not everyone was spoiled like I was. It had many, many, many things. So if you want one, if you want to get your kids into it and you don't really want to ruin your H.I.S.S, this is worth going out and getting. It's hours of fun, just like ours were. If you need it for a display, I'm not gonna lie, I've come across 6 or 7 of them out there, 4 in one spot, and it was tempting not to. It was hard to not spend $100 to have a whole fleet of H.I.S.S, because you go back to your childhood and you're like, wow, to have a whole fleet of H.I.S.S. But I left them for everyone, because one thing, I don't want to spend $100 because I'm chasing these classified figures. I'm chasing all of these retro figures, and other little things that, you know, are coming out of the G.I. Joe. So we finally have something to collect rather than the original stuff and going back to any of the stuff that's come out in the past, 30 years. So if you like the H.I.S.S, if you're wondering about the retro, it's worth getting. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you want to follow me on Instagram, once again, my name is Punk Rock Skate Dad. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you.